He didn't raise his voice much when he was younger. But one day, at 77, he turned to his wife and screamed, "You've ruined everything. I should have left you decades ago." No warning, no trigger, just rage, loud and cruel. An hour later, he didn't even remember saying it. These aren't mood swings. They're early cracks in the brain that shout through the mouth, and many families ignore them until it's far too late. In this video, we'll uncover 5 emotionally damaging things seniors shouted before they were diagnosed with dementia. If you've heard even one of these, don't brush it aside. Take action before it's too late. Let's begin. Number 1. I wish you were never born. Sheila was always loving and caring, especially toward her youngest son, Matt. At 69, she still called him every night just to say goodnight. But things change fast. 3 years before her Alzheimer's diagnosis, she began snapping over small things, like when he asked her to take her pills with water or reminded her to lock the door before bed. One afternoon, after a petty argument, she turned red in the face, pointed at him, and stormed off without a word. That evening, she acted like nothing had happened. Months later, she accused Matt of trying to control her life, just because he offered to drive her to a doctor's appointment. The breaking point came on her birthday. She ripped the letter he gave her in half and muttered, "You think this paper makes me forget what you did in 1963? Matt froze. He wasn't even born until 1974. Then she looked him dead in the eye and shouted, "I hate you. I just wish you were never born." That's when he finally realized something deeper was unraveling. The part of Sheila's brain that softened harsh thoughts before they reached her mouth, it was already breaking down. In Alzheimer's, that emotional filter is one of the first systems to fail. Guilt, restraint, and empathy stop working the way they used to. So when something upset her, what came out was raw, brutal, and unedited. And because her memory circuits were also unraveling, Sheila forgot the words the next day, but Matt never did. Number 2, don't touch me. Gary had always been affectionate. He hugged his grandkids too long, kissed his wife every morning, and never shied away from holding hands in public. But at age 76, he started flinching when people reached for him. At first, it was subtle, pulling back when his daughter helped him with his jacket. But his reactions grew sharper. One day, his granddaughter gave him a surprise hug from behind. Gary spun around, shoved her arm away, and yelled, "Don't scare me like that." His daughter tried to calm him, but he backed away like she was a stranger. The final straw came weeks later when he accused his wife of trying to trap him just for grabbing his wrist. "Don't touch me ever again," he shouted. She had only been helping him out of the car. It took days of effort to convince him to see a doctor, and when he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, he glared at the physician and snapped, "Give me a break. Who believes what this fake doc says?" The regions of Gary's brain responsible for spatial awareness and emotional interpretation were beginning to misfire. What once felt comforting now felt threatening, confusing, or even hostile. In Lewy body dementia, the brain struggles to process gentle touch or proximity accurately. Gary wasn't rejecting his family's love. He was reacting to a world that no longer made sense to him and pushing it away in fear. Number 3, I hope you go first. Marjorie was an anxious woman, but never cruel. She had always leaned on her husband Tom for reassurance, asking if the door was locked, if the car was parked straight, if the oven was off. But at 80, 2 years before her mixed dementia became official, her dependency started to warp into something darker. She began accusing Tom of wanting her to disappear, even after he'd made her coffee or surprised her with flowers. One night as they lay in bed, she asked if he thought she'd outlive him. He laughed and said, "Not if I can help it." It was a joke they'd shared for years, but this time she froze, then said, "That's not funny. I hope you go first." She refused to speak to him for the entire week after that night. And one morning, as he sat down beside her, she stared at him and shouted the words that made his jaw drop. "I can't stand you anymore. I need you to go away forever." He didn't respond, just got up slowly, held back tears, and called their doctor. The fear processing center in Marjorie's brain was growing overactive, while the parts that balanced logic and emotion were beginning to shut down. In some forms of dementia, especially mixed types, this imbalance creates irrational fears of abandonment, loss, or betrayal. Her brain was twisting safety into threat, routine into danger. Marjorie wasn't being hateful. She was bracing for a future she could no longer understand, and striking out at the only person left trying to hold her together. That's 2 years of emotional damage families didn't understand. 2 years of shouting, blaming, and fear, dismissed as just getting older, and often 2 years of wounds that never fully heal. These hurtful outbursts may seem like personality changes, but they're deeper. Catching them early could mean more time, better care, and fewer regrets. Let's keep going. Number 4, you've ruined my life. Dennis had always been soft-spoken. He stayed out of arguments and rarely raised his voice, especially with his only son, Alex. But around age 73, just a year before his frontotemporal dementia diagnosis, Dennis started growing bitter toward him. He began accusing Alex of meddling, even when he was just trying to help, like adjusting the thermostat or setting up his new hearing aid. One day, after Alex helped him cancel a bank account Dennis had forgotten he even opened, Dennis went quiet for hours and refused to speak. That evening, when Alex asked what he wanted for dinner, Dennis stared at him coldly and said, "You know you've just ruined my life today." He turned off the TV and walked out of the room without another word. Alex had no idea what he'd done wrong. But weeks later, when he found Dennis sitting on the toilet lid, convinced it was a train seat, he knew it was time to get help. Dennis's ability to interpret intention and control his emotional response was already falling apart. In frontotemporal dementia, judgment and empathy are often the first functions to deteriorate. Long before memory loss sets in, the brain begins misreading kindness as control and help as humiliation. Dennis wasn't trying to be cruel. His brain had started turning his closest supporter into a threat he couldn't understand. Number 5. Stop lying to me. Yvonne was always trusting. She believed in her neighbors, loaned out casserole dishes without keeping track, and never questioned a word her daughter Melanie said. But around age 73, her sense of certainty began to unravel. She started double-checking things that didn't need checking, asking Melanie 3 times a day if the mail had come, or whether someone had paid the electric bill. One evening, when Melanie reminded her they had already eaten dinner, Yvonne's face tightened. "No, we didn't," she said sharply. Melanie showed her the dirty dishes in the sink. That's when Yvonne hit the dining table and shouted, "Stop lying to me!" The outburst kept happening on and off for years until she was finally diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 77. When she accused Melanie of hiding her glasses while wearing them and insisted on calling the police, Melanie knew she couldn't handle it alone anymore. Yvonne's brain was beginning to fail at something called source memory, the ability to track where information came from and whether it was trustworthy. In Alzheimer's, the person may feel intense confusion but believe they're thinking clearly. They often lash out at the person closest to them, assuming dishonesty instead of recognizing their own disorientation. Yvonne wasn't paranoid by nature. Her brain was making her question everything, even the daughter she trusted most. They're not just angry words, they're warning signs. When someone you love starts shouting things they never would have said before, it might not be stress or stubbornness. It could be the brain's first cry for help. If you've seen even one of these outbursts, don't wait. And if you're ready to understand what else dementia hides in plain sight, watch this next video.